Squishies! Welcome back to another vlog. This is She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, Season 1, Episodes 11 and 12, Light Hope, and the Battle of Bright Moon. The penultimate episode and the season finale. Two things really I want to talk about these episodes. The first one is kind of the conflict that the first episode sets up, which is a conflict we've seen before. By the first episode, I mean the first of the episodes I'm talking about, episode 11. This is a concept we've seen before. This idea of the old mentor figure advising detachment, while the hero wants to stay attached to their friends. Heroes being heroes, generally the hero turns out to have been right about that, but often there's some kind of consequence for their choice nonetheless. And this is kind of drawing on a lot of different places when this kind of thing happens. The idea that detaching yourself from your emotional connections is a way to make better choices shows up in different cultures, in different forms, in different ways. It's a misreading is a strong term, but for example, Buddhism is often depicted as, the goal of Buddhism is often depicted as being attaining enlightenment through detaching yourself from worldly concerns. Detaching yourself from worldly concerns isn't quite the same thing as detaching yourself from all feeling. Compassion remains an important part of what a person is supposed to do and be like in Buddhism. But it's easy to read it that way. And you can, depending on the particular sub-school and who's talking and how you're arguing and so on and so forth, you can make arguments that, like, you know, privileging the well-being of friends over strangers is excessive attachment. Sometimes it's argued as being something that is demanded of leaders, in particular, that like ordinary people have the option to care about their family and loved ones more than the general good, but the leader has to be above that. And then the other argument I sometimes see is that it's very easy to step from, you know, caring about the people close to you to a kind of tribalism. And those are all good points, but at the same time, you know, the root of morality is emotion. Any statement of the form, this is better than that, is a statement of emotional preference. It's saying that you like this more than that you want this more than that. With moral statements saying this is good and that is evil, you're making an emotional statement. You're saying this good is the world I want to live in. This evil is not. And there are particular feelings, kind of, that tie into emotion. I've already mentioned one, which is compassion. But these particular feelings that form the basis of morality, we tend to try to pull this thing where we're going to use those feelings to work out a moral code and then follow that moral code regardless of how we feel. But if you're doing that, like, if you're privileging the code over the things that got you to the code in the first place, doesn't that suggest a flaw in the code? You know, you're assuming that you perfectly created the code and something is wrong with the feeling, but if the feeling is what you base the code on, then that can't be the case. You know, if the feeling is what you base the code on and there's a flaw in the feeling, why are you assuming the code is perfect? And so this idea of detachment, of not caring, of being unbiased, is kind of bullshit. And we see it around us all the time. It comes up a lot in arguments about politics, where there seems to be this idea that if you become angry, you lose. That remaining calm and disengaged means that your position is unbiased and correct, while if somebody gets upset, that means that their position is emotional and flawed, and that's a crock of shit. All it means is that the person cares about their position, and the person who is speaking dispassionately doesn't care. All else being equal, which it isn't always, but all else being equal, I'm more interested in the people who care. Because if you don't care about the issue, then you have no motivation to make an actually good decision of where you stand on it. So this so-called unbiased approach is really lacking essential information that you need to have, because you cannot make a moral choice, which all political choices are moral choices. You cannot make a moral choice without caring. Because if you don't care, if you don't have any emotional investment in it, then how do you have a preference? So this whole idea of detaching yourself is basically silly. That said, that doesn't mean that acting on every impulse is a good idea either. And it's not wrong that focusing too much on the people you care about most can lead to these kinds of tribal attitudes that cause a lot of destruction. So, it's complicated, as moral questions generally are, because the simple ones we don't really need to ask questions about. It's the complicated ones that we talk about. But ultimately, this is me saying that, as the show depicts, the right choice, like, you don't want your hero to be dispassionate. You want your hero to be on your side. You want your hero to care about you. That's just, because a dispassionate hero might be logically persuaded to turn against you. Somebody who is entirely, and I'm going to switch to a different term that means something slightly different, somebody who is entirely rational is somebody who will always act in their own self-interest. That's what rational means. They will examine the situation, think about it, decide what's in their own best interest, and act. That means, by definition, there's a limit to how much you can trust a completely rational person. What you want is somebody who is irrationally going to side with you. That's frankly what morality is about. It's the irrational behavior that makes living in a society possible. Because if everybody was rational all the time, we'd just all be constantly backstabbing each other. And the whole thing would collapse. So yeah. Detachment as defined in this show and by Light Hope. Not a great plan for somebody who's supposed to be a hero and a protector. There are other ways of understanding the concept of detachment that have a bit more validity to them, but that's not what Light Hope is presenting. The other thing I wanted to talk about, probably a lot more briefly, is, the second episode is basically one big fight, and I generally don't have a ton to say about those. I did notice something. In these 2 episodes, I haven't gone back and looked at the last couple episodes, but at least in these 2 episodes, Glimmer never glitches while she's touching a door. I don't know if that was true in past episodes. I can't think of a counterexample, but I might be forgetting one. But if true, that's actually really interesting, because that suggests that some element of She-Ra's power to stabilize the runestones and to stabilize the connection to them of people like Glimmer is still there when she's in her Adora form. And that in turn would explain why she's the only one who can be She-Ra, because she's the only one with that connection to the portable runestone that is the sword that allows her to become She-Ra. Just generally, I'm really curious, because the way Light Hope talks, it really sounds like magic in this setting is actually just people interfacing with incredibly advanced ancient technology. It's a Clark's Law kind of thing. Clark's third law, specifically. That the first one technology is so advanced that people are able to interface with it and get it to do things in ways that look like magic. But on the other hand, Entrapta talks about magic and technology as being distinct things that First One's technology allows them to be hybridized. That is also an interesting question, or an interesting way it could work. And I honestly don't know which it is. I don't know that it matters that much which it is, because magic that works like magic is magic. And frankly, magic that works like technology is technology. They're 2 different perspectives on making stuff happen. Generally speaking, magic is symbolic and metaphorical in nature and only works for certain people. And yeah, it's causing things to happen by the manipulations of symbols. Even when you're manipulating material stuff, it's in a symbolic, metaphorical way, whereas technology is manipulation of objects. It's not in symbolic ritual ways. It'll work for anybody, and it's literally just a matter of that's how shit works on its own. Magic is asking for stuff. Technology is making stuff happen. Even though they originate from the same thing. Technology ultimately comes out of science, and science really is just magic that works. There's still a difference in mindset there, because it turns out the magic that works in very specific but highly consistent ways, and it doesn't actually work that much like most of the magic that occurs to people to try most of the time, because as human beings, our world is mostly made of other human beings, and the best way to get other human beings to do stuff is talking to them, which is the manipulation of symbols to create effects. We talk to them, we create art, we express ourselves in a whole bunch of different ways, and that makes things happen in the human part of the world. And that's kind of what we all instinctively expect. That's how we expect it to work. That's why you yell at machines when they don't work. It's kind of a last ditch. You know, well, I tried all the technology stuff, so I'm instinctively going to go with magic. So there's a lot of overlap, but they are ultimately two distinct. You know, there's a shared origin. There's a lot of overlap in the sense of stuff that we don't. You know, technology we don't have can certainly seem like magic, or technology that we don't know how it works. And there's a degree to which any engagement with the world around us can be understood as symbolic manipulation. But technology is a very specific, limited, discrete kind of doing that. While magic generally refers to something a little fuzzier. So, yeah, it's kind of an open question. What's going on there, and I'm a little curious about it, but ultimately I don't know that it matters that much. Anyway, I think that's about it. Thank y'all for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, check out my Patreon for early access to vlogs, essays, let's plays, and more, and I will see you all next time. Bye!